Hey guys, it's Derrick Ruiz from eXp Realty Commercial, your apartment broker and tax strategist. And I got a really good video for you guys today. It's a Zoom meeting by landlord attorney Dennis Block, who is highlighting a good strategy for landlords who plan on keeping their building and want to run it more efficiently and raise their rents. He calls it the cash for keys strategy. So, number one, he's going to tell you why it's a great idea from a financial and math standpoint to offer your low-paying tenants a cash for keys scenario where you will pay your tenant a certain amount of money in exchange for vacating their unit. Then he's going to tell you how much your building would be worth more with higher rents, and more importantly, how to ensure that the tenant actually moves when they sign a 60-day cash for keys agreement, because there's been a lot of stories of people that change their mind at the last minute, and Dennis has a great strategy to make sure that doesn't happen in your scenario. So we're going to watch some video clips and I'll have some commentary on the Zoom meeting that Dennis Block just did. Okay, let's get started.
We have a topic today before we get into the questions and answers. And the topic today is cash for keys, or as I like to say, a voluntary vacate agreement. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about an investment that I'm going to offer to everybody who's listening to this telecast. Anybody who's listening to this telecast, I'm going to make this investment opportunity for you. And here it is, ladies and gentlemen, first time I've ever done anything like this. But here's the deal. You invest $30,000 with me, and I guarantee you that I will give each person who makes that investment with me $1,500 a month for the rest of your life. That's a $30,000 investment, and it's guaranteed, etched in stone, that you will receive for the rest of your natural life $1,500. Now, I would bet that if anybody has any ability with the concept of math, I would bet that there'd be many, many people, if not everybody, who has $30,000 and they would invest that with me. Well, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have that investment. I don't want your money. If someone would offer that to me, I would take it in a minute, in a nanominute, I would take that. So why am I telling you about this investment opportunity that I'm not offering to you? Well, because, ladies and gentlemen, you might have this investment opportunity yourself. And you say, how is that possible? Well, let's go back to the topic of the day, which is cash for keys, or as I like to say, a voluntary vacate agreement. If you have a tenant who's way under market value, and that tenant's paying you $1,500 per month, way under market value, and you know that you could get $3,000 for that unit. You know it, because you just leased out another similar unit for $3,000. So basically you're donating, based on the morons, the politicians who created this concept called rent control, you're basically donating him $1,500 per month. But what if you offered him $30,000 to move? Now, most people might think, well, that's crazy. I'm going to give a tenant $30,000. But let's think about this logically. If he's willing to accept this $30,000 relocation amount, this quote, cash for keys, you know, guaranteed, you know, you're going to be making more than $1,500 a month for the rest of your life. Now, you might have to fix the unit up a little bit. Okay, well, that would happen whether the tenant moved out or not. You'd be fixing up that unit. So why not offer tenants that are paying very low rent? Why not try at least to make an offer for them to relocate for a certain amount of money? And quite frankly, you could even go higher. In my example, it would be even more sense, right? For my example, for a situation like that, where you're offering $30,000 and you're going to get $1,500 more per month, your investment's going to be returned to you in 20 minutes, excuse me, in 20 months. In addition, if you think about it, most income property, they have a formula in terms of the selling price, which is generally 7 times the monthly gross, or excuse me, the yearly gross. So if you took $1,500 and you multiplied it times 12, and then multiplied it by 17 times, you've actually increased the value of your building $300,000. So this is a very effective strategy, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of beating rent control, which is what the concept of what I'm talking about is. It's getting your property to market value. And even if you have to put out money, even like $30,000, it's going to be worth it to do it. Now,
Okay, so what Dennis is saying essentially is by increasing your rent with the cash for keys scenario, not only are you going to be reaping the benefits of that higher rent for as long as you own the building, but the building's value is going to increase as well. Now, I went to ChatGPT to plug in some numbers, and let's take a look at how this scenario would play out in the real world. Okay, like I said, I went to ChatGPT and I plugged in the scenario. If a landlord paid a tenant $30,000 to vacate their unit that was $1,500 a month, and now they can re-rent it for $3,000 a month, how long would it cost to break even when you also factor in I'm using $15,000 for a remodel and the property will be vacant for 4 months while the remodel's going on and you re-rent the property. So let's look at this. Oh, also how much the building would increase in value by raising the rent $1,500 a month. Oh, by the way, there's a link below to this chat GPT, so feel free to look at it on your own. But basically, the value increase is about $225,000, which is not too bad by raising the rent $15,000 a month if the average gross rent multiplier was 12.5. The break-even analysis, how long it would take the landlord to break even on the total costs they need to account for. The tenant buyout was $30,000. The remodel cost was $15,000. There's a lost, there's 4 months of lost rent at $3,000 a month. That's $12,000. So the total cost is $57,000, including everything. So there's some kind of math equation here, but basically what it comes down to is it would take 3.17 years to break even after paying the $30,000, the $15,000 for the remodel, the 4 months of vacancy. So after about 3 years and 2 months, you broke even on this cash for keys scenario. But look, after 3 years, assume you're going to keep the building for another 5, 10, 15 years, you're getting an extra $18,000 every single month after the break-even period, and your building increased by $225,000. So this is a pretty good situation for not all landlords, but some landlords, especially if you're going to be keeping the building for a long time. So again, you can click the link below to view this chat GPT scenario on your own. Okay, let's listen to Dennis expound on this a little bit further.
So if you can offer your tenants money to move, now, obviously, you can evict your tenant because of a violation of the rental agreement, or they haven't paid the rent, they wanted extra people. Obviously, you want to take that first, because once you evict based on a violation of fault eviction, as it's called, then you're able to raise the rent for the next tenant coming in. We put a brand new garage in, installed a washer and dryer. Anyway, the person on the bottom was paying $995. We're getting now $5,500 a month for that duplex. So you do the math, ladies and gentlemen, and you tell me that was the cheapest $37,000 I ever paid. So if you can offer your tenants money to move, now, obviously, if you can evict your tenant because of a violation of the rental agreement, or they haven't paid the rent, they wanted extra people, obviously you want to take that first. Because once you evict based on a violation of fault eviction, as it's called, then you're able to raise the rent for the next tenant coming in. But if the tenant is acting like Mother Teresa, never does anything wrong, the rent's $1,500, you know you can get $3,000 for it, and you can play with the numbers. If you're only going to be able to get another $1,000, well, maybe you're not going to offer $30,000. Maybe you're only going to offer. I might add fixing this duplex up, but I actually even added in another bathroom to each of the 2 units, so there would be 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. We put in a brand new garage in, installed a washer and dryer. Anyway, the person on the bottom was paying $995. We're getting now $5,500 a month for that duplex. So you do the math, ladies and gentlemen, and you tell me that was the cheapest $37,000 I ever paid. So if you can offer your tenants money to move, now, obviously, if you can evict your tenant because of a violation of the rental agreement, or they haven't paid the rent, they wanted extra people, obviously you want to take that first. Because once you evict based on a violation of fault eviction, as it's called, then you're able to raise the rent for the next tenant coming in. But if the tenant is acting like Mother Teresa, never does anything wrong, the rent's $1,500, you know you can get $3,000 for it, and you can play with the numbers. If you're only going to be able to get $1,000, well, maybe you're not going to offer $30,000, maybe you're only going to offer $20,000. Does the tenant have to take it? Of course not. But if you can get even one tenant to take it, in my example, number one, you're going to make $1,500 a month for the rest of your life, and number two, you've increased the value of your building approximately $300,000. Who wouldn't do that? Okay, so there's nothing wrong in asking a tenant. It's not harassment. Say, hey, I want to pay you money to move. What do you think? But this is what you need to think about when you make this offer. Number one is how much you're going to pay him. Number two, when is he going to vacate? So you might say, I'll give you $30,000, you can vacate in 6 months. That's okay, as long as we have a proper voluntary vacate agreement. Also, when is the money to be paid? Is it to be paid immediately? Is it paid half now and half when you get out? Is it supposed to be paid when you transfer the key? So these are the things that you need to talk about. Also, during this period of time, if the guy's going to be there for an additional 3 months, that's what you agreed to. Then you want to see if rent is to be paid during that 3-month period. Does he still have to pay the rent? And again, also dealing with the security deposit, are you just going to return the security deposit to him in full, or are you going to account for it like normal security deposits? So these are the factors that you need to consider when you approach your tenant and get him to agree to vacating the unit for a certain amount of money. Now, what is the amount of money that can be negotiated? And people say, well, what is the minimum? What is the maximum? There is no minimum.
Okay, I'm going to skip this part and I'm going to go to the part where he talks about how to enforce the cash for keys agreement by putting an addendum to the rental agreement. So let's check that out.
Now, you have to be cognizant of the fact that certain jurisdictions, and I'll pick on the city of Los Angeles, does have specific rules. Those rules are not how much you have to give, but you do have to have them sign a disclosure statement that the city has prepared. The tenant does have what they call a 30-day cooling off period, where it has to be written in the contract that they have 30 days to change their mind. Most of them don't. I haven't had any actually that have changed their mind. And so you make sure that based on the jurisdiction that you're doing this, that you follow those local rules. Now, why do I call it a voluntary vacate agreement as opposed to a cash for keys? Well, let me tell you how you can get into some issues with your tenants. And that is that if you have a jurisdiction like Los Angeles and you have them sign a cash for keys agreement, I'm going to move out on September 1st, tomorrow, and I've already been given $50,000, and it's notarized and signed by every tenant in that unit, and the tenant doesn't move. Do you think your next step is to call the wonderful offices of Dennis Block and Associates and I'm immediately going to start an eviction? Because after all, he agreed to move and he didn't. So I should be able to evict on that basis. Well, of course you should be able to evict on that basis, but unfortunately that's not what the law says. In the city of Los Angeles, there's 12 reasons to evict the tenant. And one of those reasons is not, I signed a voluntary vacate agreement and I didn't move. So in that situation, if you use a standard agreement, what's going to happen is that you're going to have to sue him in civil court to get your money back if you paid him any money in advance. And there's really nothing else that you can do with that. So many years ago, I came up with a voluntary vacate agreement. And this agreement indirectly allows me to evict the tenant. And I'm going to tell you what the agreement is, even though if you need an agreement, you do have to call our office and we do charge for those agreements. But I'll even tell you how I do it. I don't mind telling my secrets. The voluntary vacate agreement is also called on the title addendum to rental agreement. So we make this voluntary vacate agreement as an addendum to your rental agreement. And then what it says is that, number one, if you take the money and you don't move, you got to give me the money back. But since it's part of the rental agreement, I could actually serve a 3-day notice to perform or quit to give me back my $30,000. If he doesn't, now I can bring forth an eviction because it's part of the rental agreement. But I was a little more insidious with regard to this agreement. So what I did was I also had a provision with regard to the attorney's fees for preparation of the agreement. So it states right in the agreement that the attorney's fees for preparation of this agreement, and by the way, that's not what we charge, but we write $2,000, that's what the preparation is for this agreement, this voluntary vacate agreement. And it says clearly that it is the landlord's responsibility to pay for the attorney fees. But then it goes on to say, if you don't vacate timely, then you have to reimburse the landlord the attorney's fees. So then if the tenant doesn't move, and remember, this is an addendum to a rental agreement. If the tenant doesn't move, now I can again serve a notice to pay, to perform or quit, giving the tenant 3 days to reimburse me for my attorney's fees. If he doesn't, that's a violation of the rental agreement. And under any jurisdiction, I'm allowed to evict based on a violation of the rental agreement. So that's my topic for the week, the voluntary vacate agreement. You might have a gold mine, ladies and gentlemen, right there in your building that you don't know. Do not be afraid to spend a bunch of money to get rid of the tenant, because all you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is do the math. And the math is pretty simple of what your return will be, not only in terms of your return on your original investment, what you gave to the tenant, but it also be in terms of increasing the value of your building. And with that.
Okay, so that's excellent advice from Dennis Block. Love him or hate him, he is the leading advocate for landlords in the city of Los Angeles and Southern California. So, just to recap, do the math to see if offering a, voluntary vacate agreement makes sense for you. And if it does, I highly recommend you call Dennis Block's office to help him draft an addendum to the rental agreement called a voluntary vacate agreement. It's He doesn't call it cash for keys because the cash for keys agreement does not attach to the lease or the rental agreement. So you have no leverage if the tenant decides to stiff you and not move. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope this was helpful for you. Hopefully, some of you will take advantage of this and get your rents up. As always, I'm here for any questions or anything. This is Derrick.ruiz, eXp Realty, apartment broker, tax strategist, all around good guy. I'm here to help. Give me a call. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks a lot.